Hello, my name is Joshua Chang, and today I'm going to be teaching you SAT grammar, and specifically, we'll be starting with subject-verb agreement. Now, to understand this relatively simple rule of grammar, we have to have a good understanding of what defines each terminology present, subject, verb, and agreement. Though I'm sure we all think we have a perfect grasp on these definitions because we're so familiar and comfortable using these terms, when learning grammar and aiming for a perfect score on this portion of the SAT exam, it's very important that we rely on rules and precision and not our vague gut feeling of what's right and wrong, which is why we're going to recap these definitions before we get deeper into this. Now, looking at these definitions, we can see that subject refers to the noun, person, place, or thing, in the sentence performing the verb. The verb is the word indicating the subject's action or state of being. And finally, agreement refers to an agreement in number, where if there's a singular subject, there must be a singular verb, and vice versa for plurals. Now, moving on, I've compiled 5 things to know when solving subject-verb agreement questions on the SAT exam, and we're going to be going through them one by one. Now, first, you got tricky singulars. Tricky singulars are words that appear to be plural, but are in fact singular, and this trips up a lot of students. I've listed every tricky singular that commonly appears on the SAT exam, and as you can see in these examples, they're followed up by a singular verb. Looking at the first example, neither of the twins is sick. Even though twins here is plural, and it may feel uncomfortable to follow it up with a singular verb is, we must note that neither present at the start of the sentence makes the subject singular. Basically, the thing to know here about tricky singulars is that the subject of the sentence does not necessarily have to have a count of 1 to be considered singular. Words such as neither or no one have a count of 0 and are considered singular subjects because they simply cannot be considered plural. And in addition, words such as everyone and everybody refer to a single collective of people and are also thus considered singular, despite the word denoting multiple people. And lastly, you have words such as each that are singular even when used on a crowd of people, because by using the word each, you're singling out individuals one by one as subjects of your sentence. So to sum up, not everything we discuss in our writing is going to fit the frame of either 1 for singulars or 2 or more for plurals. So anything referring to no one or one crowd or single individuals in said crowd is going to be considered singular in our writing. Now, next, we have tricky plurals. Now, tricky plurals aren't as complex as tricky singulars, but still confuse some students. Tricky plurals are basically words that people assume to be singular simply because we aren't familiar with their singular counterparts. We can look at the 4 examples given here: data and datum, phenomena and phenomenon, media and medium, criteria and criterion. All of these are examples of words that are commonly and incorrectly paired with singular verbs. Taking a look at the examples, the data from the computer are on my disk. The criteria for the assigned essay are very complex. We can see that both are paired with plural verb are, as they are plural subjects. For tricky plurals, the most effective and fastest method to improve is to just solve more questions and become more familiar with these terms that may at one point or another be considered singular in your mind. Now, nearing the end of this lesson, we have neither nor and either or sentence structures. Although neither and either are singular, as we've established in our tricky singular section, when grouped with nor or, the rule slightly changes and the noun that ends the phrase is what determines the verb. The rule written out below shows that in a sentence, either A or B, it is B which determines the verb. Thus, if B is a singular noun, the verb will be singular, and if B was a plural, the verb would also be plural. Now, we can see this rule in action over to the right in those 2 examples. The first example, either John or Mary is right. Mary is the last stated noun in the phrase and thus determines the singular verb is. In the second example, neither John nor the Parkers are wrong. we can see that the Parkers is the last noun, so we use the plural verb are instead of is, despite John being singular in this case. So whenever a sentence contains neither or either, we have to check if it's followed up by a nor or before dismissing the subject of the sentence as singular, like we learned whilst discussing tricky singulars. If the sentence is in fact neither nor or either or sentence structure, then you have to remember that the second noun in the subject determines the verb subsequently used. Now, finally, I have some general tips for solving these subject-verb agreement questions. The concepts of this grammar rule are fairly simple. So realistically, if you're able to properly locate the corresponding pair of subject and verb, adhering to the agreement rule shouldn't be that difficult. But sometimes sentences can be complex and unnecessarily wordy, which may make it difficult to understand which verbs refer to which subjects and vice versa. So if you find yourself in a situation unable to identify the key aspects of the sentence, the advice here is to eliminate prepositional phrases and unnecessary clauses to simplify the sentence. If you do this properly, you can cut down the sentence to its simplest state to clearly observe the sentence's subject and verb and easily assess whether or not they agree. Let's look at the examples to get a better picture of what this looks like. Taking the sentence, the cars in the lot are clean, and being able to identify the preposition in and subsequently the prepositional phrase in the lot can help us simplify the sentence down to the cars are clean. And this simplified sentence puts the subject and the verb right up against each other while also taking out a grammatically unnecessary noun, lot, to help us better see whether or not the subject and verb in the sentence are properly matched. This was an example of getting rid of a prepositional phrase to simplify the sentence, but this can also be done by eliminating unnecessary clauses from the sentence too, as shown in the example below. The original sentence reads, Patrick, in addition to Tom and Mark, is coming to the reception. And we can identify the unnecessary clause in the sentence by the bookending of commas on either side of the phrase, in addition to Tom and Mark. By taking this phrase out, it leaves us with Patrick is coming to the reception, a much simpler version of the previous sentence. Essentially, by finding and eliminating unnecessary clauses and prepositional phrases, you're stripping sentences down to essentially their skeleton because it gets rid of miscellaneous detail that only clouds your grammatical judgment for subject-verb agreement. Having the skill to single out and leave just the main subject and the main verb side by side can be tremendously helpful for more difficult and confusing subject-verb agreement questions. So that's about it for subject-verb agreement, and I hope this helped, and good luck on your SATs.